Thank you, everybody. Welcome tonight. Kim, we're all excited about your education tonight, so please carry on.
Thanks, Aidan. Thanks, Brownie. Hi, everybody. Welcome back for those of you that have been with us before, and welcome to anybody that's new and jumping onto these Zooms. So just a couple of things to say before we get started. As Brownie said, this is an information sharing session. It's research which is based on ancient tablets, the Bible, different various books, many various books actually, to accounts or accounts of history that have been recorded. So some of this is challenging. Yes, so you may be challenged as we go through this material, particularly if you have been very deeply involved within some of the religions, because it does challenge the beliefs that we have been taught throughout history. And as we move on a journey, you're all here for a reason. You're all here because you want to expand your knowledge. And this is a great place to start with it. There is so much history that has been hidden from us. We're all at our own level of consciousness. So we all take things on board that are reminiscent of where we are at. So I really urge you to keep your mind open, to have a think about the things that we talk about, and of course, do your own research. My mum and dad used to always say to me growing up, don't believe a word I say, go and find out for yourself. To you about historical events, whether it's somebody that's bringing up something that is not historical, always find out for yourself. Then you know, you have that inner knowing, and that's the most important thing. Know that I'm not here to change your mind. I'm not here to say to you, you need to think the way that I do. That's not what it's about. My favorite saying of all time is you do you. No one should interfere with you. So please don't think this is about getting you to think differently, getting you to believe something. It's not. It's about sharing information so that you can at least go research deeper for yourself. And just finally, always go within. Use your own discernment. Know that you have everything within you. You can go within and you can go without. Use this within to confirm what you actually take in from the outside. Okay, so in saying that, let's get started. So we'll just do a quick little bit of a recap, if I can get this up. Okay. We left off last time from Atlantis, and David came in and gave us a wonderful presentation on the information that he's uncovered in regards to Atlantis. It is shrouded in mystery. We are seeing many different things around the world which are putting pieces of the puzzle together around Atlantis, what that looked like, where its location might be, what happened afterwards. So we mentioned in the last session that the Alteans were advanced enough spiritually that they were able to move to a different dimension or density. So what do we mean by that? What does that even look like? So we know that everything is energy. We're very complex beings with many different energetic bodies. We've got our physical body, our etheric body, our auric body, spiritual, causal, etc. And it goes on and on. That in itself is a whole nother session. As we move through our own spiritual evolution, we become more aware of these subtle energy bodies. We gain a greater understanding of who we are, and we operate from a higher level of awareness. And what that does is it allows us to vibrate at a higher frequency. So as that awareness becomes integrated within us, our knowledge expands in working with energy. Now, individuals and entire civilizations throughout history have been known to ascend to a high density. And just some examples of that are the Incans and the city of Shambhala. Those two particular ones, just ones off the top of my head, I'm hoping will be incorporated into a session that we can do on inner Earth and the civilizations that currently dwell in inner Earth. It's also what we are doing now. Now, most of you will be aware that at this point in time, there's a lot of talk about moving from a third density world to a fifth density world, or 3D to 5D as is commonly referred to. Our world is a three-dimensional world. As we start to become more aware of who we are, as we start to integrate that knowledge, it means that the cells in our bodies also change. It means that we start to vibrate at a higher frequency. It means that the earth itself vibrates at a higher frequency. And this is the transition that we are currently going through, particularly with this awakening that has occurred over the last few years. So we also mentioned the arcs and the halls of records in the last session that I did. So there's many halls of records around the world, and there are said to be 7 arcs on Earth and others located in our solar system. So what do we mean by arcs? What we're talking about here are large ships. And these are actually being talked about in public forums at the moment. The US military is currently focusing their attention on one located in the vicinity of the Bermuda Triangle. In fact, it's actually just been recently moved further out to sea to bring it into international waters. The locations of these arcs are said to be obviously international, the one near the Bermuda Triangle, one in South America, Antarctica, the Pacific Ocean, one near Kiev, one in northern Russia, and one under the Pyramid of Giza. That's at the moment. Said that you can only access these arcs if you have a certain DNA and are vibrating at the right frequency with the right level of consciousness. Now, there has been a lot of talk about this arc, one particular arc, which is located in Antarctica. Now, we know that the Nazis actually were doing some deals with off-world civilizations in that particular area. Now, there has been accounts written of people going or being taken to Antarctica where they have either tried to use their DNA to open it, they have used probably any way that you can possibly think of to gain access to these arcs. But they were set up so that the keys to actually gaining access was that you had to have all of those things: the right DNA, the right frequency, and the right level of consciousness. Now, generally located around these arcs are the halls of records. Now, I know in the account from the Romanian Department 0, which is their department that deals with unusual phenomenon, if you like, they found a number of these halls of records which were connected to the Bajeci Mountains in Romania. The one being under the Pyramid of Giza, and one also in Iraq, underground in Iraq. The one in Iraq, they said, contained these little square units in there. When you took them off the wall, they would open and project a holographic image which displayed a certain time in history. Now, there was said to be thousands of these little metallic square cases, if you like, removed, put into a military base somewhere, or by the Smithsonian Society, whoever did that, the Masons, and hidden from us. So it's really important. I just wanted to mention these things because it really leads into the next part of our history, which is the Great Flood. So 9600 BC, we're left with the creation of a tsunami causing the flood that we can all relate to in the biblical story of Noah. And there is many accounts throughout over 200 Indigenous cultures around the world that tell a similar story. But let's just have a look at the historical accounts that we can actually see. So the first account that was recorded was in the Atrahasis, and followed by the Epic of Gilgamesh, which then was later translated into the biblical story. if we follow the story of the Bible, very early on in Genesis, we see that man very quickly becomes wicked and judgmental. In Genesis 6:6, it says here, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on earth. I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast. Then the Lord said to Noah, come into the ark, you and all your household. You shall take with you 7 each of every clean animal, 2 each of animals that are unclean, also 7 each of birds of the air, to keep the species alive on earth. So those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. So there's a few things here that we just need to ask ourselves about what's going on. So we've got a bit of a conflicting story. So are we taking 7 or are we taking 2? And that depends on the passage that you are reading in the Bible. And of everything on earth, again, how is that able to happen when Noah was only in one location? How did the Lord possibly shut him in? When we correlate our picture of the Lord, how is it that he actually took that physical presence at that point to be able to shut the door of the boat? Was there really only one righteous family on earth at that time? Was Noah it? Was there no one else who held that level of righteousness? And would the God that we know really do such a thing to annihilate the entire human population on earth? So the story of Noah and the flood in the Bible, for me, really raises a lot of questions about what are they really talking about here? So we can start to get a few answers in the Atrahasis. So the Atrahasis here, which is translated, states, the country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. He addressed the great gods. So here again, we've got one god addressing the great gods. Now, if we remember back to the previous presentations, the great gods were a group of Anunnaki who had visited Earth. Atrahasis, who is Noah, my God is out of favor with your God. Enki and Enlil have become angry with each other. They have driven me out of my house. Now, these parts in bracket here, the Atrahasis is a very old, obviously, tablet, and there are bits and pieces missing from it. Since I always stand in awe of Enki, he told me of this matter. So the Atrahasis actually refers to Enki and Enlil. The elders, the carpenter brought his axe. The reed worker brought his stone. A child brought bitumen. The poor fetched what was needed. Everything there was, pure ones, fat ones, he selected and put on board. The birds that fly in the sky, cattle of Shak Khan, he put on board. He invited his people to a feast. He put his family on board. Adad bellowed from the clouds. When he, Atrahasis, heard this noise, bitumen was bought and sealed his door. He sealed his door. While he was closing up his door, Adad kept bellowing from the clouds. The flood came out. The Kassisu weapon went against the people like an army. No one could see anyone else. They could not be recognized in the catastrophe. The flood roared like a bull. Remember that, that's important. Like a wild ass screaming in the winds. I'm not sure that that was the correct translation, but I think that was the best they could do at the time. Anu went berserk, the gods, his sons before him. However could I, in the assembly of gods, have ordered such destruction with them? Enlil was strong enough to give a wicked order. So after the waters had subsided, the warrior Enlil spotted the boat and was furious with the Adigi. No form should have ever escaped. How did any man survive the catastrophe? Who but Enki would do this? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. He said, I did it in defiance of you. I made sure life was preserved. So the word for Noah's Ark in ancient Hebrew, according to this translation, is Tabor. It literally means the thing one settles into. It comes from a group of root words meaning to settle back in or down. Now, Noah's Ark in the Old Testament is described as a rectangular box with straight sides, no keel, bows, or hull. And according to historians, none of the descriptions contained in the ancient literature satisfied any kind of naval engineering standards whatsoever. So going by the designs mentioned, the ark would have been completely unseaworthy. So we must have a look at the fact that Hebrews in that period had very little experience with naval engineering since they weren't people of the ocean. Now, just another account here. The Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library Project tells us a different light on the story. This information is also supported by the depictions which are seen on the baptistry of San Giovanni in Florence, on one of the entrance doors, which was created in 1059. So you can see there on the second panel, top left, it's entitled The Drunkenness of Noah, and it depicts the biblical story of the Great Flood. So in this account, Noah's Ark is not a boat or any other vessel, but is an Egyptian pyramid. It shows the entrance for the rescuing of the animals down the bottom, and up the top, you can see the trapdoor through which Noah sent a dove and a raven to explore after the flood. According to the Leon Levy Dead Sea Scrolls, which supports this 1059 depiction in the baptistry in Florence, the original word for ark was pyramid. So Jean-Charles Moyen diarised in his early childhood the presence of an ark under the Giza Plateau, and he has since revisited this location as an adult. Elena Danan supports this through her visits to an ark under the Giza Pyramid. So we have to ask the question then, what was the ark? Really, what was it? Was it a boat, or was it in reality some other craft, or was it a pyramid? In Elena's account, the ark was a spaceship preserving genetic samples. The human tribal group of Noah carried important genes in their blood, and Enki didn't want to let Noah and his lineage disappear, for their DNA was from the lineage of Adamu, his creation. And that's the reason why I actually wanted to do the introduction and just follow on from the Atlantis presentation, or the one prior to that, where it talked about, it mentioned the arks and the halls of records. So one of these arks is located under the Pyramid of Giza. The Pyramid of Giza is depicted in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it's also shown in this Florence church. So was it more in alignment with the arks that are being discovered and activated around the world today, as discussed by the US military? So was there really two of every single animal placed in that ark, in that pyramid on the planet? If so, how? Or was it a DNA bank that was protected to preserve all life on Earth? So would Noah really have taken only his family? He had a feast beforehand. Could he have just turned around and said, on your bike to everybody, you're not welcome on here, it's only my family I'm taking? Or did there, or was there a lot more people taken on board, whatever it was? Were they the only survivors worldwide? And if so, how is it that the legends have been passed down through generation after generation after generation through over 200 Indigenous cultures? So we must question the accounts of history that we've been taught when it comes to Noah and the ark. So after the flood, the Sumerian King's List tablet was discovered in 1922 by Herbert Weld Blundell, and in it, the King's List actually says here, then the flood swept over. After the flood had swept over, and the kingship had descended from heaven. The kingship was in Kish. So again, we've got the reference of the kingship descending from heaven. So could it be that we have some other type of vessel which actually took people up when the floods were happening? Dolores Cannon also does a lot of hypnotherapy work in past life regression, if you like. She recounts a lot of sessions where people have remembered being there at this time. Each of them talk about a gathering, a coming together. A feast was held, if you like, maybe by Noah, Atrahasis. She did accounts that they gathered up as many as they could and loaded them onto a ship highly advanced, which was able to keep them in stasis in time, so that when they landed again, it was not, it was sort of like they were landing at the right time, but they were safe. There was more than one. So that's not an account that is documented, but those are accounts that are done via past life regression hypnotherapy. So from here, we see the rebuilding of humanity over a period of time. Various kings ruling from 1200 years and slowly decreasing in time, I think, to about 30. Again, it's a little unusual for someone to rule for 1200 years. The big difference in this is the rulership period prior to the flood. At its longest, one king ruled for 108,000 years, and at its shortest, 18,600 years. So we have to ask ourselves the question, could a human do that? Or could it possibly be a hybrid or a different civilization altogether? So 5,400 BC, Enlil saw, as it sent a new contingent to set in the valley of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, where the city of Eridu was built. So 600 years later, the great Mesopotamian civilization had an increasingly flamboyant renaissance during that period. Now, ancient records document the interactions of ETs and a custodial god named Yahweh or Jehovah. Enlil, as we will see in a later presentation, well, actually later on in this one, took on the persona of Yahweh. Now, Yahweh is very, very commonly referred to, very often referred to in the Old Testament. And this is really important to keep this in mind here. Yahweh in the Old Testament was related with cruelty. It's littered throughout the text with the creation of wars, of sacrifices, the whole divide and conquer tactics. The book of Enoch documents this period. It mentions the second arrival of the Nephilim, an Anunnaki subgroup who interbred with the local populations and created a race of giants. The Anunnaki would later pass their kingship of Eridu to their hybrid descendants, who would be followed subsequently by human kings. And that's where we can actually see the decrease in rulership time. So it started off with advanced civilizations who live a lot longer than we do, down to the 30 to 40, maybe 50, 60, 70 years of human kings. During this period of time, the gods would either return to their home, relocate in orbit of Earth, or remain and work on their shadow pursuits. Around 4,800 BC, we start to see the beginnings of the creation of the ruling elite. So we have to remember that Enlil is half Anunnaki and half Seeker from the Alpha Draconis system. He was mostly raised in the company of his mother in the Seeker Empire. So around this period of time, we see the Seeker taking control of the planet again, this time infiltrating an intermediary class of humans. They intermingled with them and created a hybridized ruling elite. So this is where it started. The taking over of the royal classes of the main human societies And again, during this period, the Earth went into a time of global war. Every time this civilization or this species comes into this planet, war erupts. It's one of their go-tos. It's what they do. Now, due to these wars at that time, most of the Anunnaki gods left the planet, handing over their rulership to the human hybridized bloodlines. Around 3700 BC, it saw the official start of the 5,700 years of reptilian overlord enslavement over humanity, and remembering how they work. So they infiltrate all levels of government. They create corporations. They utilize those corporations to expand progressively right throughout the world. Build underground bases, progressively expanding that with a web of tunnels. In the early stages, a central government is created with leaders and institutions on the surface based on their multi-level caste system. So they actually send their fingers out, their tendrils out from their central government right out to the rest of the world. What are we working towards now? What do they want to implement now? A one world government, right? How similar is that to the central government? Agreements are in place or put in place, agreements of interest are put in place with the shadow governments that are initiated. They use the elites, the ham elites, as their executive minions, made to believe that they will have the ultimate power. And for a long time, for us here, they have, because we have given it to them, because we haven't realized what is going on. So they eventually come to control the media, the corporations, the institutions, the financial systems, instigating wars, scarcity, fears, insecurity, encourage corruption, religious extremism, etc., etc. It goes on and on. Everything that we see in today's society. So 3125 before Christ, King Nama or Menes controls the entire Egyptian territory. The Egyptian royal dynasties throughout history have kept their bloodline as pure as possible by intermarrying. Now that list on the list there on the left, the right-hand side there, is a list, I believe, of the 13 bloodline families that are current today and have been current for a long time. They're not names that we normally recognize. As you start to follow the family tree and the history down, you then start to see the names, the more commonly known names of Rockefellers, of Rothschilds, etc., etc. Associated with this is the popes and their bloodline, how they've been initiated and instigated into the whole web and design of all of this governmental structure. So this really brings us into then the history of the Zions. So we're just going to go through a little bit of history here about the location and the creation of what we now know to be Zionism. So the name Zion is an Israelite Canaanite name on which Jerusalem was built. Mount Zion became the name for the Temple Mount. Its meaning shifted to ancient Jerusalem, Western Hill, and then was further expanded out over time to describe the entire land of Israel. So Zion is the place where Yahweh is king, covering Mount Zion, Jerusalem, and the Israelites. So it started off as just a mountain, and then as time went on, spread its wings to cover the rest. And it's considered the action of the seat of Yahweh in history. Mount Zion further later on came to be known as the seat of government. So the Horites in the Old Testament arrived in the area that was later known as Canaan. We can see then that the Canaanites were the Horites from the region of northern Mesopotamia. Now, northern Mesopotamia was actually the location of where Enlil had his rulership for eons and eons of time. So these are his people, or the people who he ruled over, migrated from northern Mesopotamia over to Mount Zion. Canaan was situated at crossroads to several cultures: Egyptian, Mycenaean, Cretan, Hurrian, and Mesopotamian cultures. They had settled on Mount Zion. And it's really interesting, and it's good to point out here those different cultures there, because the infiltration through each of those cultures is very prevalent, particularly as we go through Egyptian history and then followed on from there. So about 1250 BC, the Israelites entered Canaan, setting first in the hills and then to the south. The Israelite infiltration was opposed by the Canaanites at this time. So another important distinction here: the Israelites were not the Canaanites. They are two different cultures. They're from two different locations, one from the south and one from the east. The Canaanites suffered further invasion from the Philistines and eventually established a coalition of 5 city-states on the southern coast of Canaan. Under the leadership of King David in 10th century BC, the Israelites were able to take power from the Philistine and vanquish the Canaanites completely from this area, taking the city of Jerusalem. So Canaan became, for all practical purposes, the land of Israel. So under the leadership of King David, I think I've just got that one already. So the term Mount Zion has also been used to describe the city of David. It's found in 2 Samuel, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st Kings, etc., many other locations throughout the Bible. As you go through these texts, we find that Mount Zion came to mean the seat of government, and the dwellings that they often refer to, the city of Jerusalem. So if we have a look at Psalm 74:2, now depending on which Bible you will look at, it will either have Yahweh in there or it will have the Lord. It says, Yahweh, remember your congregation, which you have purchased of old, the rod of your inheritance, which you have redeemed, this on Mount Zion where you dwell. So again, it's reconfirming Yahweh Enlil lives on Mount Zion. When we have a look at the actual translation for this passage, we look at the Hebrew root words and the primitive root words, it tells us a completely different story. So purchased means to attain, like to keep cattle. Of old is either from the east, and that which is before ancient, from of old and beginnings. Rod means clan or tribe. Inheritance, patriarchal inheritance given by the father. And redeem, anger, revenge, and vengeance. So when we have a look at that passage, incorporating the root words or the primitive root words, it gives it a whole new meaning. It says, Yahweh, remember your congregation, which you have attained like keeping cattle from the ancient beginnings, because of the patriarchal inheritance of the tribe which you belong to, that you have by anger and revenge taken when you are on Mount Zion. So here we've got an entity named Yahweh that has, through anger, vengeance, revenge, taken for himself a group of people because of the tribe he belonged to in the first place. We also start to see the unfolding of what he is really about. This wasn't about looking after his people. This was about taking control of them for revenge, for vengeance, through the anger that had been created over a period of time. So it's important here to note a few things on the worshipping of Enlil and Yahweh, or Yahweh. So the Hurrians and the Hittites both worshipped him as their main supreme god, Enlil. The Hurrians pronounced his name as Elil, Elel, or El. Now, interesting enough, if you look then towards other pronunciations of different gods, for example, Allah, etc., you can see the simulation. When you always go back to the root words of what they are talking about, you start to see how these gods take on different personages over different periods of time. He always has his main location based on a hill, and that's to better communicate with his sky realm. So Enlil in Sumerian means the great commander of the armies of the sky. And those epithets in Mesopotamia includes titles such as the Great Mountain, sometimes described as Raging Storm, Storm God, or Wild Bull. So that Wild Bull reference, roaring like a bull when we went through the Noah's story, possibly related back to here. We know that Enlil was the one who created the great destruction from the flood. The Mesopotamians refer to him as a father, a king, and a supreme lord of the universe. So when the Hurrians arrived and set up on the hill of Zion, and their supreme god was Enlil, this was also adopted by those who came after. Enlil was shortened to El, meaning God, or Elohim, meaning gods. He was known as the father of humanity. He was portrayed as an elderly bearded man who was very old, very wise, and lives on the mountain. So originally, the Canaanite god El was the patron deity of the Israelites. Yahweh in text was originally a distant small deity from South Canaan, also originally a storm god from the kingdom of Edom. So you can start to see the correlations of different texts, different mentions in history where they're all talking about the same thing and coming to the same conclusion. So the Israelites were assimilated with the Canaanites, and over time, El then became Yahweh. So now we look at the establishment of Zionism. So Zionism has been around for an extremely long time. So Yahweh entered the picture as God on the mountain. Over time, the mountain acquired an aura of sanctity, and it was subject to many traditions during the Canaanite period when it was a center for El Elyon. In Christianity, it is taught that El Elyon is the host of heaven, El meaning God, Elyon meaning Most High. Not all of those traditions were good. Isaiah, who was bound by Abraham and asked to be sacrificed. So we have to ask that question again. Would the God that we know be involved with sacrifice? So it's also important to note that this same God goes through many name changes over history, this being one of the first, from El Elyon to Yahweh. Another important passage from the Bible relates to Jacob. Jacob was wrestling with a man or an angel or El, depending on which passage that you're reading. And El said to Jacob, "What is your name?" He said, "My name is Jacob." And El said, "No, your name is Israel." Is standing for Isis, the daughter of Seth, who is the father of Saturn. Ra being the Egyptian god. El, the Canaanite head god. So now we have three gods represented in one, Israel. So Zion eventually came to mean the Jewish homeland, symbolizing Judaism or the Jewish nation's aspirations. Jeremiah 31 states here, "There shall be a day that the watchman from Mount Ephron will cry, 'Arise, and let us go up to Mount Zion unto Yahweh our God.'" Jeremiah 55, "They shall ask the way to Zion with their faces towards it, saying, 'Come, let us bind ourselves to Yahweh in perpetual everlasting covenant that shall not be forgotten.'" Right there. There's the creation of Zionism. Right there. It tells us in the Bible. Micah 4:2. "And many nations shall come and say, Let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh and to the house of Elohim of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we shall walk in his path. For out of Zion the law shall go forth, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Wow. Let's translate that. Let's go to the seat of government of Yahweh. And let's go into the dwelling place, the home of the different gods that have come together to lie to us and put us into a system believing it is one God. people chose to bind themselves in oath, an everlasting covenant, and it shall never be forgotten. The Mountain of Zion is a government where they made the binding contracts right there before Christ. It created the system that we are living in today, the system that has brainwashed and imprisoned the entire population, the system that's created by evil entities that want to conquer nations, that want blood sacrifice, that want to go to war, that want virgins, that want to be worshipped and bowed down to. What's a really important thing to remember here is that these gods, one of their biggest things is that they absolutely 100% want to be worshipped. And that's what they preach. When we worship something, we bend on our knees, right? We give our power away. We are saying, we give you control over us, over me. That's what worshipping is. And that's what we've been taught. That's what's been drummed into us. Be that through a worshipping of God. Be that through a worshipping of Jesus. Be that through a worshipping of another deity. It doesn't matter. The whole point of this, the whole purpose is to have humanity bend on their knees and worship someone. Why? Because they know we hold the keys in here. We have everything that we need. Jesus actually said, you can go forth and do more than I. What was he meaning by that? So the Bible is actually telling us we're not to worship anything external. We hold that creative source within us. We need to go in within and access, not give our power away to something or someone else. So quite some time later, the Protocols of Zion were established in writing. Now, they're translated from the Russian of Nihilus by Victor E. Marsden. He undertook that at the British Museum. The earliest reference in that book, in the Protocols of Zion, was to the 1600s. What this document does is it lays out the plan. And in this instance, protocols means the minutes of the proceedings of the meetings of the learned elders of Zion. These protocols give the substance of addresses delivered to the innermost circle of the rulers of Zion. They reveal the concerted plan of action developed through the ages and edited by the elders themselves. The presumption is strong that the protocols were issued or reissued at the first Zionist Congress held at Basel in 1827 under the presidency of the father of modern Zionism, the late Theodore Herzl. The protocols on who are the elders, they say, this is a secret which has not been revealed. They are the hidden hand. They are not the Board of Deputies, the Jewish Parliament, or the Universal Israelite Alliance, which sits in Paris. What it does mention is 300 men, each of whom knows all the others, govern the fate of the European continent, and that they elect their successors from their entourage. Now, when we, just by that statement alone there, that's already in reference to the Committee of 300. So what we know is that this group have established themselves a seat of government, a seat of central government. And this is where we see the breakdown that they have sent their tendrils out. They've created all of these secret societies, the Masons, the Fabians, the Committee of 300, all of the other three-letter agencies that we are also well aware of. They put their people in place. The infiltration starts at the top. It filters down. Now, they make these people believe that they will get the ultimate prize. And in their minds, that is immortality. What they don't tell their minions, as they call them themselves, is that immortality is not from them. They are used and thrown away like a dirty rag. when their time is done. Or if they don't toe the line and do the bidding exactly to the letter, then their time is done. So all of this relates back to the establishment of Zionism before Christ. So when we see things that come out where this has only been going on for the last 60 years or the last 100 years or maybe since the 1600s or whatever the case may be, it hasn't been. It's been established long before any history or general history will tell you. I'm just going to come out of here. So it's important to know where the seed of this establishment has come from, I think, and what it actually looks like, who was involved, and how it's managed to actually infiltrate the rest of the world to bring us to this point of where we are today. Now, I mentioned in the very first session of the history that one of the things that they are afraid of is they do not want us to know who we are. Hence the reason, through the infiltration of all religions, to redirect the path of humanity to worship an external being, no matter what that looks like, because that keeps us in a program of enslavement. That keeps us from looking at who we truly are. That keeps us from recognizing that we each have a fractal of source within us that we can reconnect to. It keeps us from saying or looking for the answers in here. It keeps us from growing ourselves to that point of awareness where we know who we truly are, what we hold as humans, how much potential we have, how much change we can affect, the manifestation powers that we have individually and collectively. This is why it's so important that throughout this journey, we really look within here. We don't buy into the divide and conquer narrative that has been rolling out since before Christ. It's their age-old MO, and they do a good job of it. They do a good job of it in every movement. We can relate that back to, for example, the freedom movements, the religious movements, any movements that get moving. They will always do an infiltration to ensure that there is division. There is division. When there is division, they can conquer. It is why it is so important during this time that unification is necessary. That we firstly align ourselves with who we are, and then we unite together from the highest good, from the highest perspective, from that fractal of creative source. When we do that, we are unstoppable. And it is the thing that they are most afraid of. Keep that in mind. Everyone needs to keep that in mind as you journey down your road. No judgment. Leave people to do what they do. It's not your business to interfere. Of course, if you see something doing wrong, sure, do what you need to do. But is very much, as I said before, you do you, and you let others do themselves. And then collectively, we can do together, because we all have that greater understanding of who we are and how to move forward. We don't get upset by little idiosyncrasies of people. We don't allow someone else's actions to affect us, because we realize that that is their own journey. And we must leave others to walk their own journey. They have their own path, as do you. As I said in the last one, we are all the beacons of light. We are the ones, and many more, who are gaining that greater understanding of ourselves. The time is nearing very, very soon where we are going to extend our hands and our hearts to help those along who don't. So remember who you are. Remember the beautiful beings that you are. Remember the light that you emit. And remember that light touches everyone that you come into contact with. Thank you. That sums it up for this evening.
Wow, thank you, Kim. That was awesome. May I ask you a question, Kim? You were talking about corporations, and you were talking about thousands of years ago that whoever it was using corporations in those days. Is that the corporations we understand corporations to be, or are you talking about something?
Sorry, no, that was a depiction of what they are doing more in latter times or later times. Maybe not in before Christ, but oh, who knows? They may have. I don't know. But that reference was more to this point in history now, or I should say the last however many
what
thousands,
they were doing is
hundreds
what
of years. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what they're doing is what we're living now. They were doing that in a different form, but same concept. Okay, good.
Absolutely. So the creation and the foundation of what they were doing back in those days before Christ is exactly the same. The MO is exactly the same. The thing is with these people, they are not creative. They can only rinse and repeat. They can only just put a different face on it. It's interesting because as you read the different passages, you see that Enlil or Yahweh comes in and out of Zion. Now he goes to a different location and pitches the two against each other. And now how synchronistic is that to today's world when we know that those who are in the controlling positions create the wars and they pitch the two countries against each other. Now we have a very personal story that actually confirms that. So we know that to be true. But the MO for that is exactly the same as it was before Christ. It just takes on a different front.
And we've even got a company out called Hawaii or something out there, isn't there? The communication.
So there is,
company, isn't it?
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that one, but what I do know is that there is a lot of push at the moment to resurrect Zionism. Now, people have a fairly good idea of where that resurrection of Zionism has come from. But what people don't realize is that when you do this, you also buy into that energy of it. So you feed it more, not just on a physical level, but on a non-physical level as well. So it has the potential to grow.
Right.
Most, I'm sure, would not even realize what that means and what it's about.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Does anybody have any questions of Kim this evening? Could they please raise their hand? As usual, your information has dumbfounded all of us, and we're in awe.
Kim, right at the very start of your talk tonight, you started reading from the Bible, and I asked a question that wasn't answered as to what version of the Bible are you referring to, because over the time, there's slight differences in verbiage which completely change the reading and meaning of the different verses of the Bible.
The one that I was referring to at the very beginning was the King James, I believe.
Yeah, well, that's a Rothschild bastardization of the Bible. It's
yes, it is.
Rothschilds. Oh, well, they corrupted it.
I think they corrupted it right from the beginning, Jeff, actually. But yes, that first one was from the King James. So, and hence also the comparison in there to the Atrahasis, which is the earliest known form of the story of Noah and the Great Flood. No one's got any other questions or anything? Actually, you have, I do have a copy of the Protocols of Zion. They're very interesting. I don't know if any of you have read them before. I can pop that into, I can pop the links into the chat.
Look out, that's scary. Well, actually, a good question to ask is the Protocols of Zion. Give us a snapshot of what they intended to do to us before we got onto them.
Yeah. Okay. So they actually talk. They reference the Masons in here a lot. Funny enough, in the Protocols of Zion, they talk about infiltrating every level of government. They talk about creating two-party government. They talk about the use of despotism, alcohol, classicism, corruption. It's actually a really well laid out plan. Sorry, Brownie, go ahead.
No, I'm just giving a tick to everything because that's how it's been. It's like a perfect plan, and here we are at the end of this. We've caught them at the end before they can do their last dastardly deeds. Pretty cool.
Yeah, they talk about economic wars. It's funny, they go into details, like economic wars. They talk about the symbolic snake and its significance, the instability of the constitutional scales. They talk about terror in palaces, power, ambition, parliaments, the army of the Mason jury of the Goyim. They talk about hunger. What else do they talk about? There is so much stuff in here that it's really, it is literally the plan.
On a practical level, and I'm going to be a bit forthright here. On a practical level, here we are, and we talk about Australia, and Ricardo Bossi talks a lot about the goat jockeys, which is the Freemasons. There is a Freemason temple or synagogue, call it what you will, in every town, and I've got one in Beenleigh where I live. How will the Alliance take them down? Because they're everywhere and they're in all levels of government, and it's a good thing this recording is going on to a private thing on Rumble. That's all I can say.
So one of the things that we have to remember is when they bring people into Freemasonry, they don't know a thing. Most of the ones at the lower level have got no idea. What is interesting is that they have to do a blood oath. Now, for me, that is an immediate question. Why would you have to, when you join, that is your walkaway time right there. If you were going to join an organization that is only there to do good and help the community and society, why do you have to do a blood oath? But they do.
I thought the blood oath, Kim, was a bit higher up. I believe in the early stages of the because my dad he was a doctor and he was a Freemason because that's what they did. But I believe in the early stages, as you said, the minions, when they bring them in, they believe they're doing good and they're doing the good in society. They're not committing to anything more than that.
That's correct, and that goes right up to quite a lot of levels. But I'm pretty sure they've still got to do the oath, unless it's changed. It could maybe it's changed, but I can't imagine that it would have.
So they have to do the blood oath right from the beginning.
That's what I thought, but even still, you would have to question at any point. But yeah, so most of the Freemasons that are belonging to that particular group have no idea what is going on at those upper echelons. I don't even know the ones in the local towns. I don't know. Really difficult to say how much they would even know. But you're right, Brownie. It's a massive, massive organization. The infiltration to everything is beyond comprehension for most of us.
Yes.
So I don't know what that's going to look at. The only thing we can do is just remember that there is a lot of good people in there who have got no idea.
That's mainly what it is. They bring them in, and only over a period of time that they start to thin the herd and work out who they can hold with blackmail, etc.
Yeah, exactly. And that's
beautiful. Okay, come on, guys. Who wants to ask the question? Come on.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Nora.
Hi.
Nora.
I just want to ask a question because I listened to Billy Carson. I bought into his channel, Forbidden Knowledge TV. Yeah. And it's really hard because I was born a Catholic. So when once the EBS is announced for the whole concept of the Vatican and the Bible itself, when listening to Billy Carson, it's hard to say what parts of the Bible is actually correct because the early scribes of the Vatican took different texts from, say, the Sumerian tablets and different tablets. So do you know much about that? And what part of the Bible is actually correct?
So the only thing that I can do, I do the same thing as I have a look at the ancient Sumerian text, the Babylonian texts. I do my research based on them and do the references to the Bible with that. Sometimes the accounts are similar, sometimes they're not. They are trying to, and we have seen this right throughout history, trying to keep the true history, even the ones that are inscribed on those different tablets, from the mass population. Because once people start to question whether the Bible is correct or not, then they've got a big, big problem. Because once you question one thing, then your mind automatically goes off on so many different questions that it brings into doubt everything that is written. So the really, really not going to want that information to come out in any way. How are people going to react? Then this is where, who knows? You know, I sometimes think about this myself and I think, oh my goodness, this is going to be mayhem when people find out about this. But do you know, I actually think a lot more people know than what we give credit. And even if only people, if the majority of people just have learned one thing or have become aware of one thing, then the rest is not such a shock that they can't process. And that's where these kinds of groups and many, many others around the world come into play. This is where we stand and shine the light for the others. Extend the heart, extend the hand, extend compassion, and take them through what we can just to get them through that period, which no doubt will be quite confronting.
I think, you know, with the EBS, with the disclosures that's going to be announced, that will be shocking enough for a lot of people. But once people are accepting of the new medbed technology that will be coming, because one of the biggest things that humanity is going to face is that the medbeds can, you'll be able to remember your past lives. So that's
So
going to be
there's
shocking
different.
in itself too.
So so whilst they talk about the Adamu, the DNA, the original DNA being embedded into the med beds, and it's your choice whether you are upgraded to that or not.
Yeah,
You still have to remember that you are going to need to go through your own evolution. It doesn't mean automatically that you're upgraded to 12 activated DNA, for example. You've got this massive influx of knowledge and you've got no idea what to do with it. You personally and physically have to go through that process where you still need to do your own learning, deal with your own issues, actually get to the point where you are open to learning. It will become accelerated, of course, particularly in the new frequencies, with the frequencies that we are in now.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that technology can't upgrade your consciousness. It can upgrade the activation or the ability to activate, but you still have to do you. You still have to go through learning. You still have to go through internet integration.
yeah. Yeah, because I spent 35 years of my life to heal myself and heal the generational trauma and karma in my life. So my family don't accept what I've done that healed that karma of centuries probably before me. And, you know, it's it was very hard and you sort of, you know, had to go through it, but I just feel you feel just so free, you know,
Nora,
and
what that
light.
absolutely. And that is one of the best things that you can do for yourself. Because
Yeah.
when you do that, when you actually go through that healing process of past and future, because time doesn't exist out there,
Yeah.
what you do is you allow the integration of knowledge from those past lives, from those future lives to come into the now, ready to be
Yeah.
accessed for when you need it.
Yeah.
So that's incredible that you've done that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, you know, I believe there's multi-dimensional selves of ourselves, and what
Yeah.
we create now in the present is what we create in our multi-dimensional self.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Team.
I have a question that I know I could ask you later, and I feel like I'm making myself a bit vulnerable, but I know there's at least one other person on tonight with the same question. So, as you know, I was brought up in a church home, and I've always had many, many questions about the Bible and the violence that God ordained, and, you know, it just has never made sense to me, so much of it. We've discussed that ourselves. But it feels like this is taking away our personal God. That's where I'm challenged. And I know there's someone else on that would like an answer to that. So that's why I'm asking now.
Okay, no, that I'm so pleased that you did. 100% it is not. So God is everything and everywhere. We have that fractal of source within us. God to you is your personal journey. It is you getting to know what that actually means. When you talk to God, this isn't taking anything away from what you see as God. It's actually getting you to realize that is within you. That energy, that source, that all that is in here. We are the creators because we have that fractal of source, because we have God within us. Now, whatever that looks like for you, then you keep going down that path because it works. This isn't about changing anything that you do in prayer, in life. This is getting you to realize that it's within. And that God creative energy is in everything and is everywhere. Innate and live and not live products, things. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the word for that. Multi-universes, the source of creation of all things. So it exists everywhere. It's just not in presence, or it's not in the form of what a lot of people have been taught, that is an external power. It is an external power, but it's also internal. It can't not be both because it is everywhere and everything. But how you talk to God is your thing. It's your personal way. It is who you are. It's how you relate. And whatever that looks like for you is wonderful.
So there is one God, also there are lots of gods. Our Indigenous call the great creator one God. So who's the God?
Now, it depends on how you're looking at God here. So having lots of gods means that they're as physical or non-physical beings that we are worshipping, or that people are worshipping, or people are relating to. There is only one creative source. And you call it God, you can call it the creator, you can call it creative source, you can call it whatever you like. There is no separation, so that there are God powers in different beings or different entities. That pathway right there is where the bowing down, getting on your knees, getting humanity to sit on their knees, to worship something, which means that you give your power away. So when you're talking gods, in a lot of the scriptures, in a lot of the depictions of gods, they are external entities that want power, a power to control. There is only one creative source.
Yeah, okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I get that.
Corbus.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for this. It was amazing. Absolutely beautiful. Really enjoyed it. Lots to think about. And then just a quick one on the Bible and the history books, be it the Book of Enoch or the Holy Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of the Dead. All the books so far until today, since writing started and grammar started to get developed, none of those books have brought us to where we are. Not one of those books did anything. They're just books. In other words, the actions, the creativity of people is what has brought us to where we are right now. And this is it. So yeah, to me, it's straightforward. God, G-O-D, grantor of domain. And then also the book, the Bible. The word "by" means two. It's the book of two. Biden, okay, I don't know how many Bidens there are, but it's more than one. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's to me, it's the book of division. Because I've never, ever in my life seen a group get together that has ever agreed on anything in the Bible, depending on, how you see it, whatever. But the point I'm making is that all we have right now is where we are now, and we've got the moment of now perpetually into the future, which is our creative point. The future hasn't happened yet, and the past is gone. So we need to use that creative spark within us and see what are we going to do about where we are now, regardless of how we got here. It's not going to change where we are now. Just something to think about here for me.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Corbus. Agreed. Hey, Rob.
Hi, Kim. How are you? Thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation, as per usual. Yeah, I think even Corbus brought it up, and I totally agree with him. It's very much 30 years ago or something like that is when I walked away from this whole dogma of religion, because the Christian religion anyway, because you look at every single war that has been fought in history, every single one has been fought over a damn book, a Bible. That's what it's all about. When you claim your own, as you say, you claim your own energy, that's what it's all about. You're no longer giving yourself away to anyone. And I totally agree with that. And it is within us. God is within each of us. And I think what Tina was asking, was worried about that giving herself away. It's God is within us. That is where all the power is, not in some damn book. That's the way I look at it anyway, because all that does is teach division, which is what Corbus was saying. I totally agree with his slant of that. It is actually quite an interesting look at it, and he's I believe absolutely right. So thank you so much for an absolutely wonderful presentation, Kim. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Rob, and thank you. Yeah, and it's great. Yeah.
Just a quick note, Rob. The word religion, L-I-G, that is a ligament or lignus, something that's gluing or that ties, and re means again. So the word religion means to tie again. That's the meaning of the word religion.
Fair enough, yeah.
I just want to check with Dad if I can tell the story of the war guy.
Privateer.
Which the movie, in relation to the movie, yes, the privateer, the guy on both sides.
Can Kim tell a story that you were involved in?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. It's just very topical. So we saw throughout that presentation, and it's one of the things that's been very prevalent throughout history, is that wars used to divide and conquer. Dad used to work for an oil company, and he was over in the Philippines and was invited out on a boat one day, and it just so happens that there was a few American dignitaries on this boat. I also had the guy who turns out was the one that bought weapons for both sides of a war that they were planning. Now, for whatever reason, Dad had never met this man before. For whatever reason, this guy came up, and I was chatting to Dad, basically said to him, "This is what I do, and I'm done. I want out. Can you meet me for breakfast in the morning?" So Dad said, "Sure, no problems." They went and had breakfast, as you can imagine. He's looking over his shoulder the whole time, wondering if there's anybody around, if he's going to actually get out of breakfast. So the conversation went on, and it was obviously a lot more detailed than what I'm giving you now. So it's a bit of an overview, but the crux of the story was he really wanted to know how he could get out of this vocation, because he was that guy. He was that guy that worked for the people, that created the wars, and he supplied the weapons to both sides of the war. So he asked Dad what to do. And Dad said to him, "You've either got to go insane, or you've got to find God, either one of those," which he did. This guy, they made that Nicolas Cage movie on. Nicolas Cage played the guy in that movie. That was him. I can't think of the name of the movie, by the way. But
yeah, they partied for a week. They had both sides of
the generals.
The general
there you go.
Together, and then they worked out who was going to
the spoils of war.
Yeah, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So, and Dad had said, you need to become a religious nut, or where they, they think you're crazy.
No further use to.
But he's still alive. We come across him last year. Oh, we didn't see him, but there was an article about him.
So the advice worked. But I just really wanted to tell you that it happens. It's true. Mum and Dad have had that personal experience to know that it is actual fact. So they've got a lot more stories, by the way, but that's topical. So I'll leave it there with their stories.
I think, Kim, you've put all 40 of us or 45 of us to sleep.
Well, that's not good.
I mean that we're satisfied with the information you've given us, and we need to spend some time and dissect it.
No dramas.
Digest is the word. Dissect.
Digest.
Digest.
That's the one.
Yes, digest.
Right.
I'm looking for that movie. I'm looking at Nicolas Cage's list of movies.
The Lord of War? I think. Something like that.
Lord of the War.
Lord of the War.
Okay.
Oh, The God of War is the movie. There you go. Thanks, Jason. I will make sure I've got a list of references and books and things for the next one.
Thanks, Kim. Been absolutely
And
awesome.
no problem.
thanks,
And thank you everybody
Aidan.
for coming on. Yeah, thanks, Aidan. Thanks, Brownie,
Been
for
awesome.
hosting, and Aidan for hosting. Very much appreciated.